The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
On TECHxploration, your trusted tour guides will explore every corner of Florida for the latest tech and innovations emerging within our communities. As an inside look ahead at Florida's future.
Hey there! This is episode number 25 of TECHxploration on the Florida Podcast Network, where we are discovering the tech and innovation spaces thriving under the Florida sun. I'm Amber, the lead content producer at the Florida Podcast Network, and today I'm filling in for producer Jemmy, who is the primary host of this show. But don't worry, she'll be back. So on today's episode, I'm speaking with Samuel Arms. He started the Florida Blockchain Business Association in 2017, and the association's goal is to foster an innovative and entrepreneurial environment for all blockchain-related businesses in Florida. They're also super involved with getting specific Web3 friendly policies passed in Tallahassee and even at the federal level. So Samuel and I, we talk a lot about that. And let me tell you, that process is not for the faint of heart. Trying to get a bill passed in Florida could take a minute, but Samuel and his team have achieved a lot in just the past 6 years in terms of passing legislation for blockchain businesses and startups and whatnot. So definitely stay tuned for that conversation alone. It's very fascinating. We also dive into why Florida is so awesome, specifically in the tech industry. I mean, you guys know, Florida is booming with tech industry potential. I mean, not even potential, progress really. And Samuel gets into all of that and what makes Florida so special in that regard. Okay, just a quick disclaimer before we jump in. The Florida Blockchain Business Association is a bit of a mouthful, to say the least, so you'll hear us call it FBBA throughout our conversation. Okay, that's all I have. Please enjoy my chat with Samuel Arms. Samuel Arms, welcome to the TECHxploration podcast. I'm so glad you're here with me today behind the mic. How's it going?
Good. Super excited to be here, Amber, and tell you about everything that we got going on in Web3, Bitcoin, and Florida.
So speaking of Web3, Bitcoin, blockchain, all those nice terms that are becoming more and more relevant, for anyone who doesn't know what those things mean, can you please explain what is blockchain, what is Web3, and how do they interact with each other? Do they have anything to do with each other? Go for it.
Yeah, that's a good question. So they're now kind of more broadly used as marketing terms, funny enough. I mean, blockchain is just a database. Web3, I think they're still figuring out the definition for. Traditionally, Web3 was supposed to mean, well, Web2 is like social media. So Web3 was supposed to kind of be stuff that was built on top of, Web2, possibly, the decentralization of the internet. But now a lot of people have kind of coined it as anything blockchain crypto related, whether it's centralized or decentralized. And now I have people using the term Web 5 and Web 7, which just makes my world so much more complicated. So in a large part, they're both marketing. I mean, people have used the term blockchain and then haven't even actually used the blockchain. They just use some typical centralized database. But what I do and kind of how it affects me is I run Florida's largest Web3 advocacy firm, which focuses on the intersection of policy when it comes to Web3, blockchain, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies. So it certainly doesn't help my mission, the confusion around the terms, because when I'm talking to politicians, they're always trying to figure out, well, we thought Web3 was one thing, but now we're seeing people using it in a way we didn't really think of before, right? So is the metaverse Web3, is it Web5? But in one sense, none of that matters, right? So I kind of just speak broadly. Anything kind of new in tech, I just kind of I call Web3 at this point.
So you mentioned when, talking to politicians and pushing policies with the Florida Blockchain Business Association. Tell me a little bit more about that process. Is it tough to convince politicians to pass legislation on technology that is newly mainstream and maybe they might not even understand what it is? Like, do you have to define first what is in this policy and then, I guess, continue with your proposal in that sense?
Yeah, so that's a great question. You're spot on. So when you're thinking of legislation, most of legislation is honestly defining words in your terms, right? And the hardest part about tech is figuring out, well, one, do we really need to define what this is? So imagine being in the 90s and defining what the internet is as opposed to what it is now, right? How do you define something in a legal sense and ensure that you don't kind of lock yourself into this narrow box of what something potentially could be and how that might affect what you do in the future and how you legislate? So it's interesting because you're also bringing in the political dynamic, right? We live in very, very tough political times. Things are very partisan and everything, even stuff that you'd think would be middle of the ground issues, like even boring tech policies, always seem to kind of become partisan in some way, shape, or form. So I would say that it is definitely tough, and that can be good and bad. You don't want anyone being able to just pass any policy. So the political process in Florida and in a lot of states is specifically made to make it hard to pass legislation. I'll give you a quick example. You have to first find a bill sponsor in the House and the Senate. So you have to find a House of Representative legislator and a senator to co-sponsor your bill. And then your bill has to normally go through 3 to 4 different committees in both the House and the Senate. And if it's denied in any one of those committees, your bill dies, right? At least potentially. So you have to make your way through all those committees to then get to the House floor and the Senate floor. Then it needs to be read at least 2 times on both the House and Senate before it's voted on the 3rd time. Then once it's voted on the 3rd time, it goes to the governor's desk where he can either veto it or sign off. So that's an incredibly tough process. And each time you have to educate legislators on that entire committee, right? Mm-hmm. Which, you'll figure out the day before, oh, so-and-so's thinking about voting no because of this reason. And so you have to have an emergency phone call and bring them up to speed, figure out why they don't like your bill, what they're scared of, how do you inform them, what can you educate them on? And then you have other interests, right? You may have certain lobbyists from other sectors of the economy or people who are worried that your legislation might be touching their business. And so they might tell politicians, well, this is terrible. This is going to hurt us. Ergo, you shouldn't support it. So it's really a tough process that takes a lot of work, and you have to do a lot of relationship building to kind of build up that trust with not only your legislators, but also other people in other industries. So it's definitely a tough process.
That sounds incredibly tough. That sounds like moving 2 steps forward, 1 step back every time. Or maybe it's just thrown in the garbage and you have to start over. Like, I can't even imagine the frustration that you and your team have endured throughout the past 6 years or so that you have been pushing, for certain bills and having to start and restart that process. I can only imagine.
Yeah, it's definitely, they say in Florida, it takes you 3 to 5 years to pass a bill upon introduction. We've done very well. We've gotten since 2017, when we were founded, we've gotten 4 bills passed.
Wow.
So that's an incredibly good track record. And currently we're working on another bill this session with the current administration here in Florida. And that's looking like it'll pass, which will just keep our track record going. So it's definitely tough. We're very fortunate. Florida is a very friendly state to kind of Bitcoin and digital assets in general. So we're very fortunate. And part of that's to do with our team and what we've done. But part of it's, there's a lot of other factors. Honestly, Florida has just been a great state to deal with in technology these past couple of years. So I can't take all the credit, that's for sure, but we've definitely pushed the envelope in a lot of ways here.
No, for sure. I mean, I saw that you guys created a blockchain task force in 2019. You guys pushed for more digital asset reforms. I mean, like you said, you guys have done a lot in the short amount of time. And because you had mentioned it takes roughly 3 to 5 years from start to finish to get anything passed in the state of Florida, typically, that's a pretty big, several big wins for you guys. Do you think, aside from relationship building and being able to effectively define what it is that you guys want to implement, is there a sense that because these bills are so new and just the content of the bills themselves are so new, Web3, blockchain, all this technology, is almost kind of like there just has to be laws for these things because this is only the beginning, the tip of the iceberg of these new technologies and how they're going to evolve and how they're going to just really immerse themselves in our society. So do you think there was a sense from, these politicians, legislators who were like, yeah, you know what? We have literally nothing to regulate any of these things. We need something. And of course, I'm sure you guys had brilliant proposals.
Yes. I mean, it's multifaceted, right? I mean, a lot of these politicians, I don't think would care if there weren't advocacy firms like my own and some others that were trying to push this stuff forward. A lot of what we've done is look at existing legislation or existing laws and try to change them because people in our industry have said that it's literally hurting their business. So if we weren't, kind of preaching that message, these politicians wouldn't know, right? So they wouldn't care.
Mm-hmm.
And what they see, because you have to remember, these are elected officials every 2 years. So what they see and understand is what they see in the news, right? And so they're not always even in touch with the people in their own district who maybe gain employment from this kind of stuff. So, for example, the FTX stuff, all of that's been incredibly negative, and it has made our space look very bad.
Yeah.
But to that point, we've been here to say, well, there aren't only bad actors, right? Like here's a mom and pop shop in your district that employs 10 people who are all good, honest people. And if you pass something bad, you're going to kill their business and you've just lost yourself 10 voters, right? 10 angry voters as well, right? And so in some of these more local elections, 10's a big number, right? I mean, you see sometimes the margins in a purple district, it can be less than 1,000 votes sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Right? These margins of error. So they really, I think these politicians, especially the more local you go, do the best they can to care. Of course, you always have larger industries that come in and give them a lot of money and try to incentivize them to do certain things. But at the end of the day, it's very hard to buy off votes at the local level, right? Because the people are just more hyper aware of what's going on and just more involved in your life. So it's tough, but we've definitely progressed here in Florida on a grassroots level.
Yeah, something that I want to touch on that you said earlier is, you had so much praise and admiration for the state of Florida and how they've been embracing this new technology, Web3, blockchain, NFTs, crypto, all those things. And now we're seeing such an influx of new, as we say, like Florida transplants come into the state for exactly those reasons. So what do you think, for someone who is interested in relocating to Florida and they're in the Web3 industry, that large space, the evolving space, what can they expect when they go to, let's just say, Tampa or Miami, which is another tech hotspot right now?
Yeah, so I get calls every day, just about, from companies that are either relocating from a different state or that are relocating internationally. I mean, I get calls from London, Berlin. I've gotten calls and emails and inquiries from Singapore.
Wow.
Different parts of Asia. I mean, it's just incredible, all looking to come to Florida. So the hype and the energy is really here, and it's all over the state. And so part of my job is whenever someone is moving here and they reach out to me, I try to get them in touch with some of the big leaders in the space and wherever they're moving. So if they're moving to Miami, I have about 5 people that I know who are big in the Miami area who can immediately plug them into the Web3 scene. And that goes for Tampa, Orlando, Jacksonville, Sarasota, Naples, what have you. And now what's interesting is some of these smaller towns in Florida are attracting people because a lot of these people have families and they're moving not just their companies, but their families and their employees here. And not all of them want to raise their kids in a big city like Miami. Some of them want to move to something maybe in between, like a Fort Lauderdale or a Palm Beach or a Boca Raton or even a Jupiter, right? I mean, I have people moving to Vero Beach, to Melbourne, Port St. Lucie, New Smyrna, because a lot of them, they love the Web3 scene, but they also just love Florida. And they're like, you know what? Moving by the beach sounds pretty nice. And as long as I'm within maybe a 2-hour drive of where I need to be, that's good enough for me.
Wow. I mean, yeah, Florida just has so much to offer. I'm sure it's not a hard sell. I mean, they're coming to you for a reason to get your insights. That's really fascinating. I didn't know that you were providing, I guess, like I said, those insights for new Florida residents. That's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, my mission is to ensure that Florida is kind of the place to be for this stuff. And part one of that is ensuring we have good regulations here to not only keep people here, but then the part two of that is to attract more people here, right? And as long as we have a friendly environment, more people will move here. And network effects are real. I mean, part of what makes Silicon Valley, or what made Silicon Valley so strong, was if you wanted to raise capital and you wanted to be in the know, you just had to move there. Mm-hmm. It's about who you meet in the hallways, in the coffee shops, who you meet and are able to collaborate with you because they're sitting next to you. Well, that's starting to happen here in Florida, where it's easy to email and set up calls, but when you're constantly bumping into people who you can potentially collaborate with and you can grab them for 10 to 15 minutes to have a quick talk, there's a lot of value in that. Right. And so that's why we do a lot of networking events around the state. I mean, you have a lot of conferences now that have moved to Florida. So network effects and kind of those social impacts are incredibly valuable.
Yeah. And just to piggyback off that of networking, you created the Florida Blockchain Business Association seemingly out of necessity. You and I were chatting about this a few weeks ago, but you basically had told me there wasn't anything else like FBBA in Florida at the time. Tell me more about that gap back in 2017 in Florida's Web3 space.
It's incredible because, I mean, I'm still confused by the fact that we're in 2023. I mean, I feel like when people say 3 years ago, I'm stuck in 2020. So I'm like, yeah, 3 years ago was 2017. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's 6 years. Holy cow.
So
I want to cry. But so 2017 Florida was an entirely different world. We were incredibly early. There weren't a lot of businesses here in the Web3 space, although that was starting to happen. Florida really blew up during COVID when we stayed open and when Mayor Suarez started aggressively seeking out these Web3 companies. Those two factors turned Florida into the burgeoning tech hub that it is today. And so the roots were already there. There were already communities here. It was slowly growing in tech. It's not like we didn't have tech people slowly moving here then. But 2020 and 2021 accelerated that probably 5 to 10 times. And so when we were in 2017, we saw a need because, one, we noticed that there weren't any other states doing this. We had a very particular group of people that we thought we could pull this off here in Florida, even if it was just a grassroots movement. I mean, for a while, we really saw ourselves not as a business as association, but as an association to kind of educate people on how to vote, right? If you can think of some of these more political organizations where you give politicians ratings depending on where they fall on certain policies, right? That's kind of how we were thinking. But then we realized, man, these businesses do need representation. And that's kind of where we pivoted and became more business focused. And it's just done us very well. And that we've continued to kind of grow and pursue that momentum now. So, Florida in 2023 now is this burgeoning tech hub where people are consistently moving here, consistently trying to get in touch with the Web3 space. And, I travel all over the state. I mean, you think of even places like Naples. Naples is, where they say people go to die, right? It's this nice, lavish retirement community. It's beautiful. But now, you have Bitcoin miners in Naples of all places. You have Web3 companies starting out of there. There's a younger population moving there. It's only, an hour and a half, 2 hours from Fort Lauderdale in Miami. So, when you see places like Naples starting to transform, I mean, now it really gives you pause to say, man, what is going on here? What's happening here?
Yeah, I mean, that's when you really know. I didn't know it was starting to touch even Naples. Like you said, I have this preconceived notion of Naples. I think a lot of people do, a lot of Floridians. But that's really, really great to hear. So let's talk real quick about becoming a member for FBBA for anyone listening who is just automatically interested. And if you are, you guys should check out the website. We will link it in our show notes. It's a beautiful site. I honestly love on the homepage where you have the Welcome to Florida sign and it says Welcome to the Sunshine State, but you guys crossed it out and put the blockchain state. That's awesome.
Yeah, I love that. I love that image.
So just to be clear, the FBBA is for businesses, not individuals, correct?
Correct. We used to be focused on individuals, but we made the pivot to just strictly businesses because we also realized that, one, we really needed to cater to businesses because they're the ones who are actively affected by legislation and the ones who are actually employing these people. So they have a lot more skin in the game than your average individual or what you might call your average activist, so to speak. So we really pivoted our model to go from kind of an activist organization to a very strict business association. So we kind of operate, you can think of us like any chamber of commerce or Better Business Bureau, where we really do everything we can to connect the businesses here in Florida, to give them networking opportunities, because if you're in the space, you really want attorneys who are focused in this area. If you're in real estate and you're looking to tokenize real estate, you really want people who understand it through and through when it comes to marketing, when it comes to fundraising, business development. So we really try to fast track the business development for a lot of our members, and that's where a lot of their value comes from.
So how can a business apply, and what specific businesses are you guys looking for? I know you mentioned in our previous conversation that startups are huge for you guys.
Yeah, so we have a form that people can fill out on our website, and we have a decently strict interview process to where you essentially need someone within the association to vouch for you to get in. And so that's one of the ways that we vet people is on that very personal basis, because our reputation is really valued to us. And so we do our best to keep out scammers and really make sure that, because when you're thinking of talking to politicians, right, we don't want to just represent anybody. We don't care how much money you're willing to give us. You need to be a good person who's trying to follow the rule of law, right, and have a good reputation as a founder or a founding team or an investor, right? So most people who are inquiring to join, they fill out a form on our website, and then they always get a response shortly thereafter. We do about 1 or 2 interview calls where we see if they're a good fit once they apply. And then normally after we go through those 2 calls, we either extend an offer for them to join, or we say, we're sorry, this isn't a good fit.
And what do you guys offer other than like development and educational tools to your members? I know you mentioned networking events. Tell me a little bit more about those opportunities for members.
Yeah, so the majority of people who come aboard, frankly, want to be involved in the legislative process.
Mm.
Where they see the value is they want good regulation. And that's some of the toughest hurdles to go by. So a lot of these people come aboard because they see the long game in it. Everything else almost becomes an add-on or an extra. So legislation is the number one priority. The networking is probably number two, right? The networking and the relationships. So we host events, we partner with events, we get our members in front of speaking gigs, we do articles on them, we try to publish press releases for them, right? So the hardest part for a lot of these businesses is they don't even know how to get themselves out there. They don't even know kind of the resources that were available to them, right? So honestly, my main job beyond the legislative piece is just connecting the right people with each other. And that's where a lot of people have gained value from us. So, I've connected people who have just told me, man, I've been looking for someone like this for years. And finally I found somebody, right? Because we really are being in such a new field, finding legitimate people who actually understand this stuff makes a world of difference. It makes a world of difference. So, we've hosted conferences and masterminds, and like the masterminds that we do, we'll limit them to 100 people. We go in depth on certain topics, whether that's regulatory or technology focused, and really go really hard on education. Right? Not just like a 30-minute panel, but we're talking sometimes a 3-hour discussion, right? So that everyone leaves really having a good grasp of where we are in the market, what we need to understand if we want to implement certain technologies in the Web3 space. So we really do our best. I tell every member who's applying to join, I tell them, my goal is to provide value for you. If I can't provide value for you, there's no reason for you to join. But if I can and you see value in kind of what I'm preaching, then we need to sign you up sooner rather than later.
What I'm hearing is it sounds very community oriented and similar to what you were saying about building relationships with the legislators to help pass bills and whatnot. You guys are also helping each other. And is it bad if I say I'm a little bit surprised? Because I think there's a stigma with the tech industry that it's quite cutthroat. What I'm hearing, though, is it's a very new technology, mainstream new, if you will. And like you said, people are just trying to figure out who do they have to know, who do they have to talk to. Would you say it's a pretty inclusive community? Or, I mean, I'm not asking you to like bash your industry or whatnot in terms of the culture, but do you think Florida is developing a healthier culture in that sense with the tech industry and the individuals and businesses who are part of it?
Yes and no. You're definitely right in that we've done a very good job of trying to portray the message that we are all here to help each other. And even if we're technically competitors, a rising tide lifts all boats, so they say. And so we really do believe that there's multiple ways that we can benefit each other. There is always going to be this level of competition between two people, but that's why our main focus has always been on the legislation. And that's really brought people together because frankly, if, for example, Bitcoin gets banned in the state of Florida, or if Bitcoin mining gets banned like it was in New York, well, it doesn't matter if you're competitors, you're both dead.
True.
Right? You both have to leave.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we have a grassroots mindset and heart at the end of the day. And people, when you're in the tech space, you can kind of choose who you want to work with. Like you have a lot of options. And people want to work with people they enjoy, right? And so that's kind of the biggest thing is we all really want to enjoy who we work with. And it is really unique, I think, at least for now, to our space. I mean, the difference between when you get off a call and you feel exhausted or when you get off a call and you feel energized, right? And so for a lot of the calls that I'm on, I mean, these people, we're all working hard. We're also very excited. We love collaborating. We love talking to one another. And so it definitely is. It's unique for now. I think the Florida tech scene has a unique mindset. It's different than, kind of what you would call your tech bros out in Silicon Valley. And, we still have our issues. And there's always the classic adages. I mean, we certainly don't want to promote kind of this, I don't know, like the Wolf of Wall Street bro culture that you see,
right?
Sometimes, I mean, in 2017, these Web3, crypto people, they were having parties at strip clubs, and a lot of the female founders were like, this is incredibly uncomfortable. So then in 2019, everyone was like, okay, we're not doing that. Like, we're not doing this again. Like, this isn't how you treat people. And you kind of get away from the type of people who have that culture, right? And at the end of the day, the people who have that type of culture never stay for long anyway, right? But the people that we're here with all have the same focus of, we want to make Florida great. We want to make our community great. I mean, I talk to people in Miami and they say, Miami's the best place to be. Miami's all we care about. And I hear the same thing from people in Tampa and Orlando and Palm Beach. Everyone's hyper focused on how can I make my town the best? And that means they're really invested. They're not just here to make money and leave, right? They're not trying to make money and leave and live in Cancun or, Puerto Rico. It's like, no, how can I help my community here? And because of that overall vibe of really wanting to help your state and your community, you generally attract a better group of people.
Wow, that is a great answer. I have nothing else to say or ask about that. So I want to switch gears real quick. Let's talk about the night show. Speaking of people who you enjoy working with, the night show, you're a co-host on that podcast, the video podcast. It's on YouTube, so you all should go check it out. It looks like a great time, honestly. I was taking a look at some of the clips, and you guys are all both informing the audience, but also like entertaining them in a way. So tell me about the night show.
Yeah, so I've known Joshua Jake and Lucas, and Lucas goes by the Blockchain Boy, and Joshua Jake, he goes by Joshua Jake.
Are those two first names?
Yeah, it sounds like it. I know. Joshua Jake isn't his real name. Josh is his real name, but not Jake. So I've known them both really since 2017. I mean, I've known Lucas. He's either 20 or 21. He's super young. I've known him since high school, and I met him through some of my meetups. And in 2020, they both got really big on crypto TikTok. And so they've done really well for themselves, developed a loyal fan base and following. They're really good guys. And then they've gotten to the point where they're like, well, we really want to start generating some more serious content, which they've kind of, always done, but kind of less, hey, look at this coin, and more, let's talk about geopolitics and strategy and law and how, Web3 is affecting our world, not just the Web3 space, but how can we talk about tech and AI? And, so they asked me to formally come on at the beginning of this year. And so I go on there twice a week, sometimes more, as much as I can, unless I have to travel. And I've just enjoyed it a whole bunch. I mean, the whole crew is amazing. I've known one of the founders of Kryptonite, which is the company that runs the night show, Mike Sessa. Man, I've known him since 2017. Mike Sessa, he's one of those guys where he's like, I love Orlando. I want Orlando to be the best place in the world. Right. And having known him and his passion for that city, I mean, everything he does is with the focus on kind of giving back to the community in one way or another. And so we're able to use that show to not only promote ourselves, but promote people we really love and enjoy. And really, it's a unique way to also just get experts in the field. I mean, and for me, it's a great way to learn. I mean, this just by being on there, inviting on people, I'm like, man, I don't even have to go and read. I can just have someone teach me right here on the show. Right. So
that's why I'm the host of this
experience.
Show.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I could read an article or I can talk to Samuel Arms and have him on the show. Either way.
It's definitely unique, and it keeps me on my toes because It's made me ensure that I'm up to date on everything going on. And, I can get so deep in my work that sometimes I have no clue what's going on outside of my own little world. And so it's been really valuable for me to make sure that I'm not just kind of siloed off.
Well, I think this conversation has been very valuable to a lot of our listeners. I just want to know, where can they find you if they want to learn more about you, learn more about FBBA?
So I post the most on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you can just find me. My name's Samuel Arms on both of those. And then, of course, if you want to tune in on our show, it's Kryptonite on YouTube, and you can find that on Twitter as well. And then I have a Substack that I'm posting on more just under my name, Samuel Arms. And then I have an Instagram, which is the same, Samuel Arms as well. So those are the easiest ways to find me. But if you want to reach out, Twitter is definitely the best avenue.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sam, for your time. I really appreciate you coming on the show and just sharing more about a growing industry in Florida.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Amber.
Many thanks to this week's sponsor, Flintstone Media, for continuing to help us discover the tech and innovation spaces thriving under the Florida sun. Flintstone Media, the brainchild of producer Jemmy, is also the parent company of the Florida Podcast Network. So, full circle. By the way, if you have any recommendations for guests that you think would make a great fit for TECHxploration, please email me. Seriously, I love getting guest referrals. It's like my favorite part of the job. Well, kind of, sort of. Anyways, email me with your guest referral at amber@flintstonemedia.com. But just keep in mind that anyone you refer must be a Florida resident. Be sure to visit all the great shows on the Florida Podcast Network. And thank you so much for listening to this show. And until next time, go discover something.